This episode is brought to you by Credit Karma. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve, helping you monitor your progress and giving you personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download today.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey everybody, welcome to the 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal podcast. I am your host, Brian Slagle. I am the CEO of Metal Blade Records, where bands like Metallica, Killswitch Engage, Amon Amarth, Cannibal Corpse, Gwar, Fates Warning, Armored Saint, and many, many others have called home from time to time, including the band we are going to talk about today, Slayer. That's right. We're going to go back to the early days, the beginnings, really, of Slayer. And we're going to talk about the great song Black Magic from their debut album, Show No Mercy. So I'm really excited for this one because I love the song, obviously. And this is the first podcast we've done that we're going to have a whole bunch of people that were actually involved in this song. In a moment, we're going to talk to the engineer, Mr. Bill Matoyer, about the studio production. And I was the producer, so I'm in there as well. And then we're going to talk to the man who co-wrote and played guitar on this song, Mr. Kerry King. So super excited for this one. Hope you guys enjoy it. And we're going to begin it, as we always do, with my good friend, the author of more than 150 books about rock and heavy metal, to give us a little background and history about this song. Here we go, Mr. Martin Popoff.
Thanks, Brian. All right, Slayer Black Magic. So this is from the band's debut album, Show No Mercy, December 3rd, 1983. Out on the great Metal Blade Records, produced, executive producer Brian Slagle, Bill Matoyer's in there as well. The band is working on this as well. It's the biggest song on the debut. If you look at Spotify, it's got double the amount of plays, streams, than the second most popular song on Show No Mercy, which is The Antichrist, which is kind of at half that sort of thing. Personal story, when I got this album as a new release back in 1983, well, maybe it was 84, given that it was, came out December 3rd, 83. I consider this a little bit like, how Aerosmith is an improvement on the Stones or on Led Zeppelin, when you say a band's X on steroids, Halloween is Iron Maiden on steroids sort of thing. To me, this was a band that was an improvement on Venom. So you got a lot of the things you got from Venom, but they were really locked down and professional. I think Brian and Bill got a great sound out of these guys, a great performance, a very tight performance, but we aren't quite creating thrash yet. I think thrash gets invented July 1983 when we get Kill 'Em All. This was more of a it's got elements of thrash, but it's also got elements of speed metal, and obviously imagery wise, you look at that illustrated front cover and the way the guys look, and obviously the lyrics, it's got elements of proto black metal, right? I mean, Venom is not exactly black metal. They're proto, black metal means a certain thing, Norwegian black metal and all that, which comes a lot later. So Venom and Slayer and Bathory and these bands, Merciful Fate, they're proto black metal in various ways. So you get that. But yeah, it was one, I remember thinking it was one of the heaviest albums I had ever heard at the time. And I think this is a great choice by Brian. I think it's a good illustrative song of what Slayer would do. You've got that really cool reverse fade in of the guitar, and then you've got Dave on double fisting it on hi-hats and just bass drum, and then the song kicks in. It's fast, but it's not a thrash song. It's kind of like a D-beat punk sort of beat that you get out of this thing. But they also do that cool thing that Slayer does where you do get a halftime break and you get that groove that we're going to get on the likes of South of Heaven and Seasons of the Abyss, and a little bit on Rain and Blood as well. But that's really cool on this song as well. Another thing I like about this is you get a little bit of that two style of soloing idea that you get from mentors of this band, Judas Priest. So you kind of get a KK style solo in here, and you get a Glenn Tipton style solo in here. So that's kind of cool as well. Lyrically, we're looking at just kind of like a black magic ritual sort of thing, gone wrong or gone doomy, because at the end the soul's being taken away sort of thing. So yeah, very capable, very professional song. These guys have a lot of talent, and like I say, the production and the performance, everything that goes on, this is recorded at Track Records, everything that goes on is pointing to a new professionalism. You get kind of a wet drum sound, so it's, again, that's not particularly thrash, and again, the velocities are a little bit different. So yeah, this album, obviously, July 83 is earlier than December as well, so that's the other reason this isn't an album that invents thrash. But I think Kill 'Em All really invents thrash more, and then this gets Slayer right in the game, right there at the same time, and then they're off to the races with Haunting the Chapel and Hell Awaits and all that stuff, and more great albums on Metal Blade, and then they become one of the big four as well. So there you go, Slayer Black.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
This episode is brought to you by Stouffer's. Here comes three-time juggling champion Natalia Rogers. She's juggling law school, her TA job. Oh, narrowly catches the laundry. What's that fourth ball? Parents unexpectedly showed up at dinner time? Is that too much for Natalia? Not with Stouffer's Chicken Alfredo and its mouth-watering mix of Asiago, Romano, and Parmesan. When you're juggling four things at once and the clock strikes dinner, think Stouffer's.
Magic.
Thank you, Martin. As always, an interesting amount of information from Mr. Popoff. We thank him so much for being a part of this podcast. So we're talking Slayer, we're talking the album Show No Mercy, and we're talking the song Black Magic. So now I'm going to bring in my old friend, legendary producer, who was in the studio for the entire session of this record, Mr. Bill Matoyer. Bill, how are you?
I'm doing good, Brian.
So I'm going to talk to Kerry after we talk to you, and I'm going to probably mention the same thing that I'm going to talk to you. So what was your first recollections about being in the studio with these guys?
The first recollection was, obviously, the first time they were in the studio was with Aggressive Perfector.
Yes, which was on Metal Massacre 3.
Metal Massacre 3, yeah. And I know you wanted these guys on the record. I had never heard them before. I remember when they came in and they started to just warm up their instruments. All they were doing was Judas Priest stuff. I mean, note for note, lick for lick. It was pretty incredible. Then when they got around to doing Aggressive Perfector, I was like, well, wow, I didn't really expect that. I mean, it was different. Kind of scared me, to be honest with you. There wasn't a lot of bands doing that back then. And, the guys were cool. It was pretty painless that time. And then you did decide to put out a full-length record. So by the time they got into doing Show No Mercy, I think, they were probably a little more comfortable. I was definitely more comfortable since I actually knew the guys, but I had never seen them live yet, I mean, I did not see them. I don't think I saw them live before Show No Mercy. I mean, let's face it, we were all kids back then. I mean, what? I was 23, you were 22, and they were a lot younger, So the first impression was, wow, these kids have to settle down. I mean, they were coming in and having contests about whose fart smelled the worst. They'd come into the studio with water pistols and go around the studio running around and squirting water all over this incredibly nice studio track record. And like I said, they were a bunch of kids and seems like they were having fun. So I do remember setting them up. But by the way, when it comes to setup, there's another kind of little story. When they did get around to doing their tracks, I was like, wow, these guys are really good. I've never really heard anything like this before. The other thing I do remember is when they were warming up and stuff, once in a while they'd say something like, "Oh yeah, that was pretty fast, but not as fast as Metallica." So back then there was kind of that speed war going on. But I was amazed about how good those guys were. I mean, to play anything that fast and pretty much flawlessly. And then Mr. Lombardo with his drumming. I mean, I had never worked with anyone like that before. And then when I finally got to go and see them live, I was like, wow, I think we got something here. These guys actually might be pretty big.
Obviously, we did a few records before then, and you were an accomplished engineer. I was just some young dumb kid who was playing producer. But we had done a few records before, and I liked all the stuff that we did, and I liked the music and whatever. But this was just a whole different level. Why I'd never been in the studio. I mean, I hadn't been in the studio very much anyway, but I hadn't been in the studio ever with guys that were that young, that were that talented. Like I said, once they started recording, I just felt like this is something happening here. I don't know what it is, but this is pretty amazing. And I remember, usually by the time you're finished making a record, even though we're making them in, like 2 weeks, so it wasn't a lot of time, but still, you're in the studio, for 10 hours a day or whatever it is. And by the time you're done with the record, mixing it, you're like, okay, I don't need to listen to this for a while. I've heard this 1,000 times. But this record, I could not stop listening to as soon as we were finished with it. I thought, oh my God, this is something extra special. So we got to talk about the elephant in the room here, which is the famous story that Dave Lombardo recorded his drums without cymbals and then had to overdub the cymbals, which is, kids, that's not generally the way he records. So you want to elaborate on that, Bill?
Basically what happened is there was 2 rooms at track record. One was nice and dead. That's where we put the guitars. We had to, since you want that separation, there was another room that was just cement all over, totally live as hell. And even though a lot of bands had put the drums in there before and it sounded really good with this natural reverb, when it came to Slayer, and as hard as Lombardo hit, as fast as Lombardo hit, I mean, the drums were just bleeding. The snare was bleeding into the kick drum. The cymbals were loud as hell, and they were bleeding all over the place. So it was my suggestion that, hey, why don't we just do the drums and record the cymbals later? Dave was kind of up for anything, and he did agree to do it. But, he does tend to complain about how when he listens to that record, he could tell that he was overdubbing the cymbals. The average Joe off the street, there's no way. I mean, I've gone back and listened. I go, I don't know what he's talking about. It sounds like he played the whole kit to me. But the best stuff about all of that is every time I've seen an interview with him, he blames it on you, not me. he always goes, Brian Slagle had me overdub the cymbals. So I'm like,
Well,
oh
that
well.
that's not 100% true actually, because I just saw an interview with him recently,
Oh shit.
and yeah, you got blamed on that
I
one,
got blamed. Okay.
but
Well,
it's
yeah.
okay. I wish though I'll never forget. The picture is still emblazoned in my head. I wish we would have had a camera because watching him overdub was hysterical. He's just standing there and waiting to hit the cymbals and the hi hat, and I mean he did a great job. And I'm with you. I mean, if nobody knew the story aside from Dave and maybe a couple of the drummers might
Uh-huh.
know, but it doesn't sound at all like he's overdubbed the cymbals. In fact, I listened to that record about a week ago, getting ready for this podcast because I hadn't listened to it for a while. And I mean, patting ourselves on the back, it sounded pretty good. I was considering we had no budget and all that stuff. It sounds pretty good, and I think part of that really is, and I've talked to the band about it before. They just sounded good, like their instruments sounded good. There wasn't a whole lot we had to really do to make
No.
it sound good.
Their stuff sounded good, and they played everything so well. That's the important thing. And yeah, I mean, it definitely had that old school sound. I mean, there's still bands coming to me nowadays saying we want that old school Slayer sound. We don't want a lot of stuff nowadays. People are playing to clicks. Things are cut and pasted, and it's you know they tend, some of these bands that don't want that modern sound have called me up and said we'd like to work with you because we're fans of the early Slayer and we want to sound more like that. And I'm talking kids that probably weren't even born back when that record came out. So I mean, and like I said, we considering how young we were and how green we were, I think we did a damn good job.
I've always been real proud of that record sound wise, just because look, it's a great record, obviously a legendary album, and it really, like I said, most of that was really due to the band. They were just so good,
Oh yeah,
and yeah, they played everything so like perfectly. And these kids had only been in the studio, like you said, one time to do one song, but they came in and once they kind of honed into it, I just remember them coming in and playing all this stuff, and I think both of us were looking at each other going, "Whoa, wow!"
yeah.
Like that take was perfect. Like they didn't really have to redo a lot of stuff either.
No, I don't remember that at all. And like you said, it's once they did start playing, I think we both kind of realized that that these guys were special. That we really did have something there.
So, of course, the age old story, and I mean, look, none of us could have predicted how this has turned out for them. But like back then, like, did you have any inkling at all that like this could be something truly special?
Oh hell no. There's no. I think when it comes to the music, it was just so different. I mean, it still blows me away that they did two shows at the Forum. I mean, when I guess once they played two nights at the Country Club in Reseda, and it was packed both nights. That's the first time I thought, okay, these guys are going to be popular. But even then, I had no clue how popular these guys would be.
So let's talk a little bit specifically about Black Magic. So do you remember whose idea it was to fade up the beginning of that song?
Brian, I'm lucky if I can remember to flush the toilet when I go to the bathroom, much less friggin' 40 years ago. So, no. Can I take credit? No, it must have been theirs, right?
I was trying to figure that out. I probably should ask Kerry, but I assume I'll probably forget. But I I think it was their idea. Like I remember when we were doing that record, we were basically because they're big Judas Priest fans, especially Kerry. That's his favorite band, still is today.
Amen.
And we were kind of ripping off a lot of what Judas
Yeah.
Priest had done on some of their records.
This is
And
true.
so, like some panning stuff. We did more of it, I think, on Hell Awaits than we did on this one. But
Mhm.
We did a lot of that stuff. So I think there was probably some song that they had done that they wanted to fade it up. But it's really cool, and I mean, the song really does stand the test of time. And I'm so happy that when I went to go see Kerry's new band, which is amazing, by the way, they played two Slayer songs. They played, of course, Rain and Blood and Black Magic, which I thought was really cool. And the crowd went, of course, completely nuts for it. So it's pretty amazing that song is still stood the test of time for so long, and it's still like it's always been in Slayer's set. It's now in Kerry's solo band set, and these kids just go crazy. It's just this song that we recorded, however many years ago, too many, has kind of aged pretty well. Where these whole younger generations are now getting into it. That really, when you sit down and think about stuff like that, that's what really blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean the early stuff still holds up. People that got into them a lot later in their career were going back and listening to that stuff, and I think maybe realizing that these guys were pioneers when it comes to that type of music.
Yeah, and those early records, like obviously we sell a lot of those things, and there's a lot of downloads and streams and stuff. I think part of that is people get into Slayer, and they obviously, most of them these days were not alive or were too young when that record came out, so they go backtrack to that stuff, and it's always nice to see on the iTunes charts, whatever it is, those records come up. I'm sure part of it is because they do still play some of that stuff live, which is also really great to see that I hate it when bands like don't play early stuff. They just like, oh, well, we've moved on from that, and you miss some of that early stuff. And I love the fact that those guys have always done that. I've talked to them over the years about it. And they're very proud of that early stuff, and it still resonates live, and it's special stuff.
I do get to see the sales twice a year because that's one of the bands that I worked with that to this day I still get royalties from. And the reason why I get royalties from is, I hope you don't mind me saying that, back then maybe there wasn't a lot of money in Metal Blade, and the band was asked to pay for some of the recordings. So before we started recording, oh yeah, we'll give you the money, When we finished the album, I went to the band and I said, okay, guys, you owe me the money. And they go, well, we don't have any money. And I'm like, what? Go, we don't have any money. I go, well, they go, well, we just told you that we'd pay you so that you do the record. And I was so friggin' pissed off, but I said, okay, how about if you give me a percentage of the sales? And they agreed to that. Thank God they didn't have any money because, like I said, I still get royalties for that. And it's way, way more than
Yes.
they were going to.
You should be very thankful they had no money to pay.
Boy, yes. and I thank you because you and your staff make sure that I get those checks twice a year.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun to be able to delve into one of these songs. And it's the first one we've done where we've had the producer, the engineer, and the artist all on the same podcast. So I really appreciate you doing this. A lot of great memories, and look, legendary album, legendary song. So thanks again.
Brian, I hate doing these things because people are always asking about things that I did 40 years ago that I can't fucking remember, but I do anything for you, man. And I am actually I co-produce a podcast myself, and I refuse to be on my own darn podcast. But like I said, anything for you, man.
Well, I greatly appreciate that, and you did great.
I co-produce a podcast called The Candle Power Hour, along with my buddy Diego Negretti, who was in a band called MX Machine, and another friend of ours, Dan Moore. It's available on Apple Music, Spotify, any place that you find your podcasts.
Cool. Well, go check it out. You remembered the whole thing about the squirt guns and everything. I didn't remember any of that. So your memories might be better than mine.
How could you forget that? Because there were a bunch of kids bouncing off the fucking walls and just I guess that is a good thing. When it comes to it, we were having fun back then. There wasn't the pressure that you have maybe nowadays. So Fond memories.
Other than to get the record done in time, but because we didn't have a lot of money. But yeah, it was great. Well, thanks again, man. Like I said, I really appreciate you doing this, and this was a lot of fun.
No problem, man. Thank you for having me.
As we continue our discussion on the great Slayer song Black Magic, we're going to bring in the man who played on the song and also co-wrote the song, Mr. Kerry King. I want to talk about your latest release, which you just put out, which is phenomenal, by the way. How's it going so far?
Killer, man. I mean, it feels to me like it's been out like 2 years, but it's only been out like 6 months. So it's odd for me when we go play because it seems to me like it's been out for so long. But, kids are still getting used to it. Every show, more and more kids are singing it back at Mark and us, which is super cool. Means they're getting it and liking it.
How much of this record did you write during COVID?
A lot. I was playing by myself for a long time before me and Paul felt comfortable enough to get together, travel, me coming from the East Coast now, we still play in Southern Cal. So I played a lot on my own. Like Slayer's last tour was the end of November of 19. So by the end of the Super Bowl in 2020, I was full force, working on, new material, new ideas. And I did that for quite a while. I don't think Paul and I got together until 2021 to start working on this stuff. But at that point, there was leftover stuff from Repentless. Now there's leftover stuff from Hell I Rise for the next record, and plus all I've written since then. But yeah, during COVID, Paul and I both came down with it, and I think it was June of 21, and I was stuck in California, at the hotel I stay in for rehearsals because I certainly wasn't going to fly home and give it to my wife. But fortunately, mine lasted like 3 days. It was like, jumped in my body, got scared, and jumped the fuck out. Paul had it off and on for the better part of a month, so it took us a while to get back to it. But, that being said, I remember when I was in that hotel room stuck for a few days, I finished the last 2 lyrical songs I needed, and then we were good to go.
So I was lucky enough to see your first date on the Lamb of God Mastodon tour. So I went to that show, and the first time I'd seen you guys live, and obviously I know everybody in the band, they're all amazing musicians and also very amazing people. Show was awesome, but one thing I was really happy about is that you played a couple Slayer songs, obviously you kind of have to, and one of those was Black Magic. So how did it come about that you picked that song?
I wanted to focus on things I had written or co-written because I didn't want to fuel anybody's fire for ammunition that might hate my band and hate me or whatever. Those people do exist out there. So I'm like, how can I do this the most straight up way? So I'm like, nobody can pick on me if I play songs that I co-wrote or wrote. So it started there. Raining Blood has to be played because if I'm playing one song throughout the history, it's kind of got to be that one. And Black Magic pairs really nice with it. Plus, it's a killer song, from our first record ever. So there's history there. And I wanted to definitely hit some nostalgia points because all the stuff we're playing is brand new KK material. But to throw in, stuff that people have liked for decades, and if we play a longer set, yeah, sure, then we'll play Disciple, then we'll play Chemical Warfare, we'll play Repentless. But, we only had 40 minutes on that run. So I think we played 9 songs. So to have 2 from Slayer, I think is a nice representation, as well as playing a shit ton of our new stuff.
So, all right, let's now go all the way back to the making of Show No Mercy. So I remember when we were in the studio making that thing, and I'd produced a few records at that point, but I had not been in the studio with a band at that point where I was kind of going, oh, there's something really interesting happening here. When you guys were making that record, did you feel that, or was it just you're so young that you're just kind of learning, or did you feel like, hey, this is really something cool going on?
Well, we were absolutely learning. We didn't have anything to bounce it off of. It was all first getting our feet wet in the studio. And I do remember we played throughout the night because no one wanted to record then, so we got a better rate. And we would leave like when the sun came up.
Yep.
But yeah, it was new experience. So we didn't know, it was completely learning for us, as well as, having a good time and saying, hey, people are finally going to be able to check out the music we've been writing. That's, at the end of the day, that's the coolest part of it.
Yeah, I listened to the album the other day. I hadn't listened to it for a little while. I listened to it the other day, but it sounded a lot better than I kind of remember it sounding. I was like, that's for how little amount of money we had, little time we had. It sounded really good, and I thought to myself, because I remember being in the studio when we were making it, that you guys just sounded good. Like there's everybody's tone was really good. The drums sounded good. The bass sounded good. Like your tones were really good. Did you guys really work a lot on getting your tones perfect before you went in the studio? Is it just kind of a natural thing?
At that point, it was a natural evolution of where we had gotten to, because until you land on what you're happy with, it's a work in progress. And I think by that point, we had kind of locked into pretty much where we were, for the rest of eternity since then. Locking in the tone, the distortion to the point where it's not too distorted, but heavy and full sounding. But beyond that, miking and how the board hears it is something that I have no control over. So that's tweaking it once it gets on tape.
Yeah, I don't think we had to really tweak a whole lot of it because, like I said, it sounded just so good coming out of the speakers and everything else. It was fun. Of course, we with famous story where Bill Matoyer had to take the cymbals down because they're bleeding all over everything, and poor Dave had to overdub cymbals. Aside from that, I think it came out pretty well.
That was an odd experience, and we only did it on that record.
I don't think I've ever heard of that before, or I think maybe one or two other people have talked about it, but it wasn't something that was normally done. And I'll never forget being in the studio when Dave was overdubbing the cymbals, so just hysterical, just standing there and like waiting to hit the cymbals at the right time. Very bizarre experience, but came out good.
It's definitely different.
We're talking about songs that define heavy metal, right? And this is one of those ones where obviously every single metal band and metal fan pretty much on earth are Slayer fans. And it's interesting to talk, there's always, obviously there's, Raining Blood and South Heaven and, all these different, songs that are kind of the bell tone songs that people talk about. But this one song I've noticed over the years has really kind of become in the people's top 5 Slayer songs. And it's certainly one of mine, obviously, but it's interesting that that's the case. Do you feel the same on your side as well?
The only notice I can mention anywhere remotely regarding that is when we play it live, it gets a huge pop, like bigger than I expect. Of course, it's in a different medium now because it's Kerry King presenting it, but it is my history, so I feel I should be playing it. But it really, once people figure it out, because we generally tie it on the end of Raining Blood, so they don't know if we're going into the guitar chaos at the end of Raining Blood or what the hell we're doing. But then when the kick drum comes in, they generally figure it out that it's black magic and the place fucking lights up.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Ever since, I mean, really, obviously since the beginning, but when kind of in the I don't know, mid 2000s something, when you pull out, it's kind of it's an older iconic song that people are super into it, and they know the song. It's really interesting. And like I said, I talked to so many different fans and kids that just love that song. Like, what's your favorite Slayer song? And a bunch of them will say that song. I'm like, really, over the other ones? Like, yeah. It's like, oh wow. I like that. I like that analogy.
Yeah, there's decades worth of stuff for them to pick, and for people to this day to still pick that one, it's pretty important.
And by the way, when you guys are doing it, Mark Osegueda, who's your singer, who's like one of the best singers of all time, and also again one of the nicest people of all time. Sorry to ruin that for you, Mark, but he sounds great singing that song. I really, because not really sure, people doing Slayer songs that it's not, Tom. It's like, how is this going to work over? Because it's difficult to do because Tom has such a unique voice. But I thought Mark really, especially, I mean, he did it great on both songs, but I thought this one specifically, he nailed it.
People may not even know this, but before Mark even got my gig, he would come down every once in a while and do demos with me and Paul. He's the only singer we had come down because he's my friend. He's in the Bay Area. It's super easy to get him in, and he wanted to, see if he could do this and if we could work on him and create a new Marco Segeda that people weren't used to hearing. That's what we did for months and months before he got the gig. I worked on him a lot. And then we got in the studio, and then Josh Wilbur, we both worked on him because we wanted to create a new Marco Segeda. There's nothing wrong with the old one, but I wanted to create a new, more fierce Marco Segeda, and I think we got it, and I think that translates into the Slayer stuff.
100%. I mean, when you first played me the record, I mean, obviously I knew who was singing, but I was like, wow, it doesn't sound like Mark at all.
Yeah,
He's
that's what I was going for.
yeah, it's amazing. And I talked to him about it too. I was like, is it difficult to sing that way? Because it's totally different from the way you normally sing. He says, no, I actually don't really have a problem with it. Because I was like, you're going to blow your voice out on the road? He's like, no, it's fine. I can do it. It's not a problem. It's
Dude,
become pretty
that
easy for him now.
when he sang the second song he sang was Residue in the studio. And I went in the studio, Josh is sitting in there, and I went, how did you guys get to this register? We've never rehearsed this like this before ever. So he's like, well, that's where Mark was comfortable. So I went to Mark immediately and I'm like, listen, man, is this reproducible? I don't want you singing this for 2 shows and then blowing your voice out for 5. I'm like, I don't want that to be our MO. I want to be able to play and to perform and people hear you how they hear you on the record. And he swore up and down he can do it. And God damn it, he was right.
So you guys have come back and played a few Slayer shows after being away for 5 or 6 years. And I didn't get to go to either one of the shows, but I obviously saw a lot of the footage, and it's kind of surreal for me. And that's why I kind of want to get your perspective, that it's just so over the top huge, like massively huge. The entire audience is going completely nuts, like they did on obviously on all the shows you guys played previous. But it seems like there's a newfound energy, and there's even more people that are into it now because you kind of went away. Do you feel that way too?
It's kind of like when we did the first Big Four show. I said, this is going to be really cool for the fans, and, it'd be good to see the guys. And that's about all I gave it. But then we actually played the show and, a handful more shows. I said, you know what? This is really cool for me. And I didn't expect that. And I didn't expect that when we did the Chicago show. I went with the exact same idea. I'm like, this is going to be really cool for the fans, especially fans that were too young to see us, and I hit the stage and I got goosebumps. I'm like, this is way bigger than I ever gave it credit for.
Yeah, it's just amazing, and it was super fun to see. Just like I said, the amount of people that were into it and the fervor of it. Like you see a lot of these festivals, and the big bands get a good reaction, but this was something kind of almost over the top special. I was like, wow. Now I was really bummed I didn't go because I wanted to see.
Well, we got a lot of history in Chicago too, so for the reunion show to be there, it was pretty epic, and the response was over the top. Like you said, it was way overwhelming.
Back to the writing of Black Magic. Do you remember where the riffs came from or who wrote which parts? I mean, it's a long time ago.
I know Jeff and I were both responsible for the music, but picking out who did what, if I sat down and listened to it and start picking it apart, I could probably figure out 70-80% of it, but I'm sure there'd be a gray area where I don't remember. I think I did all the lyrics, but maybe I didn't. I would have to look at the writing credits. I don't even know.
It's just you and Jeff. So, but it just says written by you guys. So it didn't say who wrote what. But you and Jeff had a pretty amazing relationship in terms of music, because all those songs that you co-wrote, basically, which is a lot of them, they feel like they're complete songs that were almost written by one brain, if that makes any sense. Like I couldn't tell like who wrote which parts ever either, because it was all so cohesive and worked together so well. How do you describe that dynamic?
Well, at that point, he was already into punk and, vomiting it back at poor Tom and myself because we weren't into it yet. Jeff got into it, and my whole thing back then was I was into the singers. I was into Halford. I was into Dio, which I am to this day. So it took me a while to figure out you don't have to have a great voice. You got to have the heart, the commitment, the conviction. And that's what happens with punk. And once I understood that, I'm like, it don't matter if they're playing 3 power chords, you don't need a riff if you've got the conviction and the commitment. So eventually I came around. But at that point, Jeff was super into the hardcore punk scene. And I think that helped with the speed of Slayer, which I would attribute to Venom as well, maybe Motorhead. But back then, that's where all that came from. And it's funny, I actually became the guy that wrote more punk stuff. Funny how that turned out. But later in our career, yeah, I could tell more about the riff and who wrote it by listening to it and knowing where it came from.
Well, that's the magic of Slayer, and really the whole movement that you guys created was all the influences came from all the European heavy metal bands that we all loved, but then there's this infusion of punk rock that came in that gave it that kind of extra little bit of oomph. And I always argue with about Iron Maiden, and those first couple Maiden records kind of had that punk influence, even though Steve Harris was like, no, I hated punk and whatever, but it somehow creeped into his writing
Oh,
style.
it's very, very punky. Yeah,
Yeah.
I will be on your side for that argument.
Yeah, and I think you guys kind of took it to the next step and really perfected it. How did you feel? Obviously we were from California, Southern California, which is not the most metal place in the world, and the scene was not the most. It ended up being a different type of metal for a lot of it. But how do you feel coming from California affected the way you wrote and how the band came together and the outlook of what you guys were doing?
It's definitely got something to do with it because if you look at it in that perspective, I would argue to say that Slayer, Metallica, and Megadeth are cut from the same leather, I guess, to where if you put Anthrax in that conversation, you say, yeah, they're from New York. They totally sound different. They don't sound like the other guys. And of course, we all have little niches and we all have little things that have our own stamp on it. But the West Coast guys definitely sound different than the New York guys. And you can say the same thing about punk too. West Coast punk and NYC punk, for instance, are very different things, and they're the same thing. It's really weird. You can definitely tell Southern California in our music. I can. It's funny. I was listening to Offspring last night, and it's just spewing Southern California. You get some of the lyrics. I'm like, that means something to me because I grew up there. I get this. So I hear Southern California in our music, but that might be hard to understand for somebody that's never been there, never lived there.
Yeah, it's interesting because most of the metal bands, like all the English and European bands, came from like the East End of London or Birmingham, these horrible, miserable places. So of course they were angry and writing very heavy metal music. But we all grew up in Southern California where the weather's nice and we have the beaches and still able to get that angst and the love of metal out of it. I found really interesting, and it was just such an odd place to have this whole scene happen. But
our angst also came from the Hollywood scene because hair metal was exploding, Motley Crue and Rat and all that stuff. And anybody from Orange County, which is where we played, where Woodstock and Radio City was, we hated that and we rebelled against it. That's why we had the black eyeliner for record one. We wanted to be the antithesis of what Hollywood hair metal was.
Yeah, and that definitely fueled a lot of the angst because I was the same way. I was obviously firmly in the real metal camp and not a fan of all that other stuff. But you're right. I think that definitely on an interesting role played a part of it. So looking back all these years later on Black Magic, what do you think of when you hear that song or when you play the song? Do you think of anything?
I still think it's a good riff. It's got good riffs in it for sure. Fun to play, which a lot of things aren't 40 years later. But it's still fun to play, and the fans go off, which makes my job easier because we're just having a good time between the fans and ourselves on stage. The energy is killer, so it's fun to play live.
Obviously, none of us when we were making this record had any inkling that all of this would happen. Like, could you ever envision all of this happening to you and the band over all these years from those early days?
No way, dude. What was I, 19 when I recorded that? If you told me then that 40 years later I'd still have a career and be able to play on some of the world's biggest stages to this day, I'd be like, fuck off. You're fucking nuts. And then here I am.
Yeah, it's just you just talk about that stuff, and it's just mind blowing. Like, there's just a real quick story that kind of shows you that. I was when Metallica's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they had a party afterwards. It just ended up being like Lars and I at the wee hours in the morning. He just looked at me. He goes, "How the fuck did all this happen?" I don't know. I don't know, dude. It doesn't make any sense to me either. It's just kind of the same thing. Like, wow, this is just insane that these bands coming from LA these years later have become, I mean, not just, you know, you having a career and being successful, all that. It's iconic. I mean, this is legendary stuff. This stuff is going to, you know, live the test of time forever. It has influence. I mean, you know, this influence so many people on so many levels. It's just kind of mind boggling.
It's very cool. You know, it's cool to be mumbled in the same phrase as Iommi or Dave Murray, Glenn Tipton, KK Downing, you know, all the heroes, Richie Blackmore. It's cool that I'm even a thought in that phrase, that sentence. I never thought that would happen, and it's super humbling that some people regard us like that. So, you know, that's a big thing for me, is like, don't let the music fill your head with thinking how great people think you are. You know, just be humble for the experience and that people dig what you're doing.
100%. I think we all started out as fans, and we still are fans. And I think,
oh yeah, totally.
That's why a lot of the metal scene, I noticed there's less and less of that, you know, egotistical kind of thing that there is in other forms of music, just because we're all fans. We're still all fans. And I think that kind of makes everybody's feet still firmly on the ground.
I think we're all fans until you meet the biggest hero that you can't talk to. And then you're over the hump and you feel like you're part of it, but you're still a fucking fan.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree there. It's craziness. Well, anyway, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know you got a busy schedule out there, so thanks for taking the time and talking about the phenomenal Slayer song, Black Magic. And have fun on the road. I'm sure I'll see you somewhere soon.
Absolutely, brother. You better get out there.
Yes, sir. Thanks, dude.
Cheers.
There you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed that. That was a real fun one for me, connecting with Bill Matoyer and Kerry King to talk about the great song Black Magic. Thanks, as always, of course, to Mr. Martin Popoff, who started us off. Thanks to the great producer, Christian Blatt. And also thanks to Lizzie Borden for our intro music. We will see you guys again next episode.
One hundred.